Well, I want to talk a bit about understanding the street predator or the repeat offending violent criminal in the street. Now, they span various ranges of endeavour, but violence is violence. So the kind of person that will, without a second thought, go out to somebody else and kill them, maim them, create serious, grievous bodily harm and or their death, injure them without thought, without hesitation. So what sort of mind is it that dictates that kind of running of that kind of emotional mental program? Before you look at any solution, you need to understand the problem. So gaining an understanding into how the street criminal mind works is a start point. First thing that separates him from the most, or them from the most average Joe. So the average Joe, law-abiding citizen, goes to work, pays his taxes, looks after his family, right? The main difference between such an individual and that person is the complete lack of any type of moral boundary. There's no moral compass. There's literally no limits to the level of violence and depravity that human nature is capable of, and we're seeing that more and more as we supposedly evolve. But the fact is, such a person will not only hurt you without hesitation, but will quite often get his mate to video it on the phone so that they can look at it and laugh about it later. So there's a huge desensitization to using violence, and that's probably coming from upbringing, you know, what they've modelled their life, product of their environment, if you like. So the majority of modern male has had it all too easy and has been pampered, and as like I said before, has been geared or steered intentionally towards being pacified. You know, they're more concerned about a man bun and a soy latte than they would be standing up for their family. So, but outside of that, such ilk as, you know, the ghetto street urchin still fucking exists. So there's still plenty of people and nasty people out there to devour the pacified. So if you want to get any chance of understanding how to deal with it, first know that the main difference is they've got no boundaries. There's no level of violence that they wouldn't go to immediately without thought. And don't define it with logic as to why they would do that. It's pointless, because it simply is. It's like, you know, Jeff Cooper's black box concept. Black box concept comes from civil engineering. And basically you flick a switch on a black box and you get 240 volts of direct current, let's say. So a pacifist might ask, well, why do you get voltage from this box when you flip a switch? Well, what's happening? Is it solar powered by the sun? Has it got a little hamster on a wheel pumping away to keep the battery going? Who gives a fuck? You flick the fucking switch and you get 240 volts of direct current or power. Now apply that same analogy to the criminal. The pacified are likely to think, oh, why is this person about to become assaultive of me? If they've got a blink of a second before they get ambushed, that is. But they would think, you know, in hindsight, well, why, what, were they a product of a broken home? Were they sexually abused as a youngster? Did they have a very tough upbringing? You know, this and this. Who gives a fuck? They're an evil fuckwit and they're going to hurt you, so you need to end them quickly. That's the kind of mentality that's going to counter their lack of moral boundaries. And that doesn't mean I have a lack of moral boundaries. Of course I do. I have ethics, good moral compass. But I have the absolute willingness to employ a level of violence that will totally eclipse theirs, should they make me a cornered animal. And the reason for that is because, you know, I have to take care of me and mine. I have to be here to protect mine. Too many people need me and I need them. I'm too important to lose, so like, fuck, will you fuck with me? That would be the first layer of my belief system. The next layer would be indignation. You know, how dare you step across this line, I'll fucking injure. How dare you threaten all I love? So that would be the second layer. of my belief system. Third layer is confidence. You know, I've been doing this shit for 42 years, most days of my life. How can you not get good? And I've had plenty of experience, less than some and a lot more than others. So I know me, and I know my enemy, in terms of what we're talking about, street urchin. Right? First thing is a lack of moral compass. So there is a desensitization to violence, massively. Yeah. Also understand that the what they do will be very simple, extremely fucking brutal, and it will always be emotionally rooted. That is, they will do it to you with hurt and hate. So weapons and multiples are very likely, with the highest probability of success. And we're seeing multiple armed assailants in the street now. Things are going fucking mad. Wait till it gets civil unrest. You know, potentially a period of unlawfulness and civil unrest, societal breakdown, before they scream for martial law and then they come in really heavy-handed. I mean, it's plausible. But the level of violence you're going to see then will just be off the scale. And films have been preparing you for it for some time. Look at that. There's no watershed no more. Everything you see on film now and TV is extremely violent, extremely sexually explicit. The profanity often includes the C word. Never used to when I was young. It's changed. It's massively changed. So as a byproduct of that, there's, you know, a generation out there that's getting so desensitized to violence that they think it's the way. So the first mental shift that you need in order to deal with that is to know there's an extreme level of violence out there, and it's getting so prevalently worse that at some point in your lifetime, what you got left, there's a very high probability that you will be faced with lethal force and a deadly threat, a level 10 threat that's capable of your demise and willing to employ it. There's a very high probability of that. So first thing, that's the first mental shift. You need to understand that that's the plausibility of the mindset out there. The next thing you need to shift is, if you're going to have any chance of dealing with that, you're going to need to cultivate a similar mindset. Bottom line is, bad people hurt good people. And if good people want to learn how to deal with bad people, they've got to cultivate some bad. And I mean a serious fucking amount of bad that is instantaneously callable in a blink. Not one that takes ages for you to muster and build up and up and up until you're ready. I'm talking an instantaneous switch. Because if someone approaches you with violence and their mental mindset of preparation to use violence is on about 8 or 9, you have no anticipation of that, no preparation mentally or otherwise for that, your preparation for immediate employment of violence would be on 0. How the fuck are you going to catch up, you know? So you have to have the ability to cultivate an instantaneous switch that allows you to access 12 to eclipse them. You need to have that in an immediate sense. And that's conditionable through training with the correct mentality and mindset. There's a need for a mental shift. So, you know, if I instantaneously recognise threat, I'm going to access a level of aggression and violence that's going to totally eclipse yours. It's the only way I'm going to be able to deal with you. And in order for you to do that, obviously you need to cultivate it through the correct training and methods, etc. You need to give yourself permission to be violent and aggressive, to give yourself a green light in your head and understand that it belongs. It's a resource, it's a necessary resource, and it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So we're going to look at certain factors that distinguish the criminal, violent subject that you're likely to meet in the street, or plural. Multiples and weapons will be a factor. And of course, from a UK perspective, for the good citizen, we are not allowed to carry any type of weapon. Any type of weapon, by design, designed for the purpose of self-protection, is forbidden. We have long since been stripped of our God-given right to arm ourselves against armed enemies that would seek to hurt or destroy us. So we've already been pacified on a on a capability level, and as well as trying to pacify man, full stop. So there's a huge disproportionate armament, because criminal and a terrorist will carry an array of weapons to use for the purpose of your demise on an everyday basis, simply because they couldn't give a fuck about the law. And the law doesn't seem to persecute these people, even if they're caught red-handed. But it won't charge you if you were to carry something that you shouldn't. So I understand where the fucking enemy is here, without me saying it, you know. There is a need now for you to shift your mentality that you will face violence, to shift your mentality that you are willing to cultivate a similar level of motivational energy in order to deal with such a problem, and along with a skill set. You want to learn good unarmed skills. There's a need for a shift now. Take your unarmed skills to military grade. Learn how to use fucking weapons. Learn how to use a point and edge tool and impact weapon. And if you're fortunate enough to live in a place where you can shoot, fucking shoot and get a gun. And why we remain lawful, in terms of so-called society being lawful, we would aim to still be an outstanding and law-abiding citizen, but we must also be a capable citizen. We must be capable of protecting ourselves and those we love, and we must be capable of standing up and intervening where it needs to be. And in order to do that, you need to accumulate some skills. So of course we want to be respectable and generally good law-abiding people, but this places you at a distinct disadvantage. The very thing that you think makes you a good person makes you vulnerable and a victim in certain cases. You need to accept the fact that in the street there's no rules and there's no fucking boundaries. You got to know what they know in order to equalise the disparity, and you've got to have the willingness to employ it, preferably first, if you've got any chance to employ some sort of tactical element to your response. Good persons usually got boundaries set in place by a good family upbringing, religion, society, sports, and there's morality, there's fair play, there's a sense of honour and respect. At least it was in my day, in the old school. Remember, the individual that you face will have no such moral breaking system. That's probably why he's chosen the path that he's on. The other thing is that, which is the absolute scale tipper, if you like, is violent criminals. I mean, the modern enemy is trained. There's a good chance that someone you end up with in a situation in a bar fight, let's say, has either done some MMA, some Thai, has a bit of ground knowledge to add to their violent background. I mean, people are training now, including with weapons. You also get the likes of the ilk that follow the combat sport and monkey see, monkey do. So, it's not unlikely if you end up in a bar fight with somebody that tunes in every week to the UFC that he's going to strive to take it down and get them out and ground and pound. So, I mean, there's that element to social violence. But what I'm referring to really is the extreme. So where you're seeing this massive divide created, which is, the more you divide people, the more resentment you create between them all. And groups of people you're seeing are just going out smashing shit up and creating civil unrest and turning the attention to other people. And like I said, if it becomes quite serious, where we have a period of lawlessness, then all fucking bets are off. People will be attacking others in the street, ramming you off the street in your car, trying to fucking home invade. There'll be all sorts of shit going on. There'll be masses of people fucking attacking others in the street. It could happen. So, you need to get your head in place for that. But another thing a street criminal has, which is massive to his advantage, is experience. There's no better training for the event than the event. And although that kind of ilk do train nowadays, I mean, particularly in the last 10 years, people are training to learn how to strike, to grapple, to kick, to use an array of weapons, including the bad people. But generally, on the whole, their primary experience for using violence is violence. And there's no better training for the event than the event. He's done this before, and he's had it done to him. So when some street urchins kicks and stomps your head like a fucking Coke can, you know, he's working in familiar territory. He's been here before, he's done it before, and he's got no psychological hurdles, if you like, that he needs to negotiate in order to give him permission. And there's no need for a build-up. I mean, you get a bully that needs to intimidate, test the waters, you know, start with a cursory glance, what the fuck are you looking at? From the fringe, you work from a distance, and he'll assess you. That's the person who's giving you the interview to see, ideally wanting you to capitulate. This is the bully. You know, this is, and then these sort of cunts still exist. And these sort of people obviously need to have a build-up before they're ready, you know. So they might approach you on 6 and amp themselves up 7, 8, 9, suddenly become monosyllabic, drop to single syllables before they assault, which is a clear indication of the interview coming to an end, and now they're going to be assaultive of your person. But there's others out there that don't need to do that. They've got an instantaneous switch that they can just access and attack you. And, you know, sociopathic traits, if you are going to have any hope of dealing with that, you need to understand that, and you need to cultivate the same within your training, you know, which I say with the right training is feasible. I mean, violent criminals are usually the result of a violent past, and it sits more comfortably with them to use it than it probably does you. You know, that gives them a distinct advantage. In fact, some of them actually enjoy it. A street predator knows that he or she is different from the rest of the herd. They just know. And the employment of immediate aggression and sudden violence will elicit a huge emotional response in you. And unless you are, you know, prepared for that, there's this highly likelihood that it's going to induce a state of complete capitulation where you freeze up like a rabbit in headlights. This is why in training it's important to, you know, replicate scenarios that elicit an adrenal response and a degree of surprise where spontaneity has to take the reins. You know, the more realistic you make your training, the more probability that you've got of closing the reality gap. So the reality gap is the street and the dojo, and between this is this big void, this big chasm, and they don't cross over or translate. So the idea of reality-based type training, particularly within to the realms of combative type training, was to narrow this reality gap. And you can narrow it quite significantly if you replicate. You can induce the effects of dysfunction that will be present when the heart rate massively escalates. And you can do that with the inducement of fatigue, disorientation, to create confusion. You can create peer pressure where you put your students in an environment where they go one at a time and they've got to fight their way out of the scenario, so they have to perform with peer pressure. You can add simulation where you have a script and you know what you're doing, and then add some spanners to it that were unannounced and see how the person reacts. The objective is, in your training, to take it to a level where you are communicating with parts of the brain that can't decipher between the reality of a real situation and something simulated or even intently visualized, as long as it elicits an emotional response. But simulation scenario training, although is the answer, it can only take you so far. There's no substitute for experience. So bear in mind that, you know, that's the massive advantage that the criminal has. So to recap then, there's no limitations, there's no moral boundaries. The brakes are not on, you know, in a moral sense. They are willing to go far beyond you would even contemplate, instantaneously without any thought. Some of them actually enjoy it. The levels of violence that they will go to are severe enough to potentially end your life, even by accident. And, you know, and they don't consider the consequences. The deterrent of prison and in court and everything else doesn't deter them. And let's face it, you know, the enemy is changing. There's many people within our society now that are coming from all different countries and different areas and all different walks of life, and all have, you know, different understanding as to what violence means to them. They all have different levels that they're willing to go to, the extreme levels, particularly if they've been brought up to, you know, from a violent upbringing. They're a product of their environment, if you like. You know, what you do a lot of, you can become good at. So the main difference that you would need to address if you are the kind of civilian that has never is training now, because realizes there's a need, for skills of personal security, self-preservation. The first stage I would tell you to look at does not involve physical skills. It involves a mind shift. You need a mindset shift. First of all, recognize that there's a fucking severe problem, and it could be a drastic need that you need to stand up and protect you and yours, right? And then look at methods that are out there that are addressing both issues from both a psychological conditioning and a physical conditioning perspective, where they're telling you that there's a need for a mental shift to understand that violence could come your way, and to understand that you may need to cultivate the ability to employ violence, to an even more severe level than you're offered, in order to prevail or escape and get home to your family. Of course, the secondary conditions are that, anything you do nowadays, you will have to articulate in a court of law or to a police officer or a judge or a jury as to why you did what you did. So I understand that what I'm suggesting is, for the good citizen, I'm taking it as a given that you have a moral compass, you're ethical, you have ethics, you have, you don't go out to hurt people, you're not offering people violence, and that's the difference. People that offer people violence are being violent and in violation. They're hurting somebody. People that respond in order to stop that violence are actually, in fact, employing use of force. And that use of force should be reflective of the threat. There should be, ideally, in an ideal world, a level of force continuum, whereby the use of force that I employ is enough and no more to stop the threat. It's proportionate use of force, and in a normal, legal world, that's what we would always strive to do. We would always strive to only use enough force necessary that is considered reasonable and necessary in the moment, in order to prevent my injury or demise, or those of others around me. You would only employ a level of force that would allow you the opportunity to facilitate an escape. It's not about teaching someone a lesson or retribution. But where the situation now has changed over the last 10 years. I mean, if you look at the amount of stabbings that we have, the amount of shootings there are, the amount of active terror threats that we've seen, and the amount of threats to us as a whole created by this massive divide and us and them and civil unrest and the potential of lawlessness, you will see that any situation you find yourself in could be potentially critical. You're facing a level 10 threat, and in which case you need a level 10 response if you're going to have any chance of fucking dealing with it. The only difference is the reason that you would employ that level of violence. So criminal ilk would employ a level of violence that will absolutely astound you simply because they can, or they forgot their medication, or they don't like your face, or they're racist, or there's something you're doing that they're not doing, or they feel offended in some way, or any number of fucking things that really determines that it's all about them. And they will be ruthless and within the guise of use of that violence. I'll only employ a level of force or violence that is going to be required of me if I'm a cornered animal. Because if I could escape, I'd escape. If I could avoid and evade, I would. If I could de-escalate, I would. But at some point, there's going to become a need to stand up and stand your ground. And in which case, I'll fight till there's nothing left to fight about. The justification for me is that I must continue my life in order to live, love, and protect those that are around me that need me, and I need them. So motivation is different. In which case, my moral compass is intact, my ethics are intact. In terms of legality, I honestly believe that the law is the second enemy, because you could do everything right, deemed reasonable and necessary, and you could still get fucked over if you don't know how to explain yourself, or some smart ass prosecutor decides that you're having some. A lot of the way you employ the use of language in linguistics can often get you into trouble if you don't know really what words mean. So people can get in trouble more often for what they say rather than what they do. But here I'm just striving to highlight the difference between a repeat offending violent criminal and the average good citizen that strives to be law abiding. It is the very things that make you a good person that make you vulnerable, because, like I said, no such moral limitations or boundaries or braking systems are in place for the other side. Quite often we're seeing within a legal system, we're seeing that good citizen gets persecuted and the criminals gets whatever is against him taken into consideration. So it's not really a win-win situation. People say, well, I'd rather be trialed by 12 than carried by 6. Yeah, but I'd rather neither. I'd rather just live my life and go about my thing and be left alone. But that's being really optimistic if I think that's going to be the way it's going to be. There's a good chance that you might have to hurt someone badly. There's a good chance you might have to end someone. In which case, get comfortable with that in your fucking head. You've got a good moral compass. You'd only do it out of an act of sheer desperation. And if you don't, you're dead. That's where it belongs. And in the context of that, the content of anything you train is legitimate as far as I'm concerned. So within UC, where we've moved more into the second facet, which is tier 1 civilian type training, and that is having really proficient unarmed skills, and I mean up to a military grade level, where I'm capable of using unarmed skills to a level 10 level, where I could use them in a sense to stop a threat, should that threat be trying to kill me. And I also would learn how to use weapons, improvised weapons, point and edge, impact weapons, shoot where legality will allow, as well as a variety of other skills. But the modern enemy's taking a shift, and self-protection is going to require that we get proficient with weapons. So it's a part of the whole thing. And if the second that you're starting to employ weapons, you are recognizing that there is the potential for lethal force when you use them, which would only be implemented because you recognize that lethal force could be used against you. So the very first thing that you need to equal the playing field between the way the criminal thinks and you think is to shift the mentality and accept that that's a need. And then you need to work on cultivating, where that belongs. First of all, we've been socially conditioned so much, so long and pacified, it's ridiculous. That left side, go get masculine, stand up for yourself side of the brain has been just almost removed in some people. So what I'm saying to a lot of people out there is probably fucking alien to them. But in my head, the man is the hunter-gatherer. You look after your family. You take care of you and yours. And if someone is potentially breaking into your home in order to rob from you and create harm and demise to you and the ones you love, then all fucking bets are off. All bets are off. The law will become redundant here. So when in the conditions of such conditions, if I had to fight tooth and nail to prevail, that would be a reasonable and necessary force within those circumstances. Whether or not the law enforcement or police or anything else would see it that way, or the justice system would see it that way, depends on a number of variables on the day, I guess. But self-preservation comes first. Get yourself in order of priority. No, we don't want to get in any legal shit and any legal trouble. And a lot of people that say, well, if you do what you suggest in a home invasion and do this to somebody and blah, 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 you're going to end up in prison. Well, if you don't, you're going to end up dead and your family's going to end up raped and killed. So make your fucking mind up. And it's usually the people that come on here and say, oh, those sort of things are ridiculous. You can't be doing that because you'll end up in deep legal shit and all the rest of it. Or just using that as an excuse because they're too fucking scared to stand up and do anything anyway. They haven't got any bollocks. You take them for an x-ray, they wouldn't find their spine. So they use that, it's all bad as an excuse. Well, I put it to you. If you want to deal with a violent predatory subject, you must have the capability within your persona to access a violent predatory subject. That is big enough to put that one away. And it's not who you are 24/7. Compartmentalize that part of yourself, put it away like a shotgun under an overcoat, and only put it out if you need it. That would be the recommendation. Hopefully you will never need it, but you might need it. And like I said, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And I honestly believe that with the time that we've got left, there's a high fucking probability you're going to face a lethal threat. TikTok, it's coming. So there's a need for you to understand the difference between you and those that would offer you extreme violence. And you need to realise there's a mental shift, there's a need for an upgrade in skills and willingness, and then maybe you'll have an opportunity to do something about it. Maybe you won't, maybe you'll die trying. Maybe you'll help others, or maybe it's just your time, but whatever, fuck it, I don't want to live forever. But the important thing is that you don't allow any violation to yourself to if you are offered violence. If you are offered it, bite its fucking face off and shit down its neck, serious. I will not tolerate any violation to me or mine in any way, shape or form, and anyone that tries that will meet their demise, or I'll meet mine doing it. So that's the kind of mentality and mindset you got, and that's the main difference. So the main difference, again, to recap, is lack of moral compass, willingness to employ violence, experience of doing so. And most like street urchin criminals are looking for status, so they're happy to do it. They're happy to go to prison and learn from other prisoners. And there is no deterrent, and they will carry weapons and use weapons regardless. So you need to know your enemy, and then start to learn about yourself, and then maybe you got shot. Peace.